Hi, I'm Mr. Simons and welcome back to our walkthrough through the 2018 HSC Economics in New South Wales multiple choice. Part 1, if you haven't seen it, I highly recommend it. Some really great questions and work by me, obviously, and you can find it with the link up above. What we're going to do in this video is we're doing questions 11 to 20. So 1 to 10, previous video, 11 to 20, this video. Okay, let's get started. Okay, here we go, question 11. So it says, let's just make sure we got the right pen. Green seems fine. It says, what change in budget outcomes from 1 to 2 represents an expansionary fiscal stance? So if I go over here and I think about what is the expansionary, well, I'm thinking about these kind of things. Now remember, an expansionary fiscal stance is all about government spending exceeds taxation. Why don't we put this in a little box, maybe a little bit of shading there. G is greater than T. So what we can see is that if we have an expansionary stance between years 1 and 2, what I could do is I could move from a deficit to a bigger deficit, a surplus to a deficit, or a surplus to a smaller surplus. All of these represent an expansionary stance. Now again, I do this so that it makes it simpler when I come to the actual answers. I know what I'm looking for. This may not work for you, or this might be very helpful in improving your marks because you start to think about, what do I need to see in the answers? So what I can say is that if I go from a surplus to a bigger surplus, no, that is a contractionary stance. If I go from a deficit to a smaller deficit, still not seeing what I'm looking for. If I go from a deficit to a surplus, that is wildly contractionary. If I go from a surplus to a deficit, that is exactly what I want. That is what I am looking for. And Nessa agrees. Okay, here we go. Question 12. Question 12. The Fair Work Act 2009, Commonwealth, facilitated the move. Okay, if I facilitate a move, if I facilitate something, I make it easier. I encourage it. So this bit of legislation encouraged the move from a state-based to a national system of industrial relations. So again, I might put a little bit of an annotation here and say I'm looking at from state-based to a national system. So what are the reasons for this? Would the government be trying to reduce the power of national employee unions if they're moving from state-based to national? Look, maybe it's possible. Let's keep this in our consideration set. Are we trying to reduce compliance costs for state governments? I'm not sure whether it would make it more expensive. Let's keep it going, right? None of these are clear to me, so let's keep it going. Because private sector companies employ workers in many states. Now that seems interesting to me because if I'm a private sector company and I've got a whole bunch of state-based systems, that's very annoying because they're different, right? If there is a move to a national system, so what we're saying here is that if we've got this, it will make it easier to employ workers and actually reduce inefficiencies in the labour market because firms don't have to go all these state-based policies, they've just got one set of regulations. So that looks good to me. The other one says because state governments typically only employ workers in their own state, well then why do you need a national system? So the answer here is C. I'm not 100% sure about these ideas. Maybe your own teacher can give you some clues, but I'm just thinking this is the most likely response. Okay, now we move to question 13. Question 13 says, which of the following statements about government regulation is most correct? So the statements about government regulation is most correct. So all government regulations reduce efficiency. That's not true because some regulations can actually improve efficiency. Indeed, that is the point of microeconomic reform. B, regulations restricting the behavior of firms can increase efficiency. Look, this is possible because if we restrict maybe the monopolist tendencies of firms and we break them up or we make markets more competitive, that could increase efficiency. So I'm willing to consider that. Microeconomic reform requires the removal of government regulation. Actually, micro could be more government regulation, but that makes markets more efficient, hopefully. Government regulations restrict the entry of transnational corporations. Not necessarily. In fact, Australia has welcomed them. So I think the best answer here is B. Regulations restricting the behavior of firms can actually increase efficiency in a market. Not an easy question though. All right, let's roll to question 14. So question 14 says, in Australia, returns to enterprise typically represent a lower proportion of household income than returns to labour because? So if I'm thinking about this, I know that returns to enterprise, the ability to mix all the other factors of production to make a successful operation, you're rewarded with profit. Now we know that the reward for labour is wages. So what we say here is in Australia, returns to enterprise, so profits, are usually less than wages for households. So I might put this here. So for households, profits tend to be less than wages in terms of income because the company tax rate is higher than some personal income tax rates. I'm not sure. I don't know about this one. I might put a question mark. Lower interest rates have significantly reduced household income from interest. I'm not sure this is getting at the question. Most workers are employed by firms and many family businesses make a loss or small profit. I'm really feeling this response. This seems like a reason why most households would earn more of their income from wages than profits. Or D, households usually comprise at least one worker and most workers are employed by large firms. Now that's incorrect. Most workers are employed by small firms. So here, the most likely response is C. So you really have to go through each option and think about, is this likely? Is this possible? Does this hold up? I'm not saying it's easy, but that's what these types of questions require from you. And these annotations could be really helpful in guiding your thinking. All right, let's say hello to question 15. Let's wave hello. Here we are at question 15. What I might do is just change pen color for a little bit. Okay. The diagram shows the relationship between a country's consumption, C, and income, Y, in year 1 and year 2. So we can see here that in year 1, consumption is higher. In year 2, consumption is lower. And you might say, well, how do you know that? Put a little dot there and a little dot there, and then I could just match it up. In year 2, consumption is there. So which of the following could explain the change? Which of the following could explain a fall in consumption? Okay, a rise in asset prices. That would probably indicate a rise in consumption because people would have more income. A rise in interest rates, yes, that would reduce consumption because more people would have to dedicate more of their income to repaying mortgages. Less people would borrow money, less injections in an economy, less consumption. Fall in unemployment, no. Fall in unemployment, more consumption. Fall in GST, more consumption. So 15 is B. What do you say, Nessa? They agree. 15B. Okay, 16. Question 16 says the table shows economic information for a hypothetical economy. So we're not saying it's Australia, we're not saying it's America, it could be anything. Here I've got the terms of trade, and what I might do just to remind myself, terms of trade is the export price index over the import price index times 100, and then I've got the TWI. So TWI is the value of the Australian dollar versus our trading partners' currencies, versus major trading partners' currencies. So let's have a look at what this says. It says, which of the following best explains the changes in the terms of trade and TWI from year 1 to year 2? You know how people call the terms of trade the TOT? I really don't like that. TOT. It just sounds, I don't know, just doesn't sound right to me. Anyway, people use it, it's fine. Which of the following best explains? So we can see that the terms of trade have appreciated and the TWI has appreciated as well. So A says there is an increase in global demand for the goods this economy exports and imports. If it said just exports, I might be cool with that because increased demand for exports would higher export prices, greater demand for the currency of this hypothetical economy. But if there's greater demand for imports, then maybe the terms of trade won't move. There's greater demand for imports, higher import prices, not going to change. I don't think A is right. B says the economy's central bank increases the official cash rate relative to global interest rates. Now, B, possibly we're going to see an increase in demand for that country's currency. So let's think about that. Global demand for the goods the economy imports has increased relative to global demands for the exports. That's not correct because the terms of trade would worsen if that happened. Global demand for the goods this economy exports has increased relative to global demand for the goods this economy imports. I think this is right. That is going to show a rise in the terms of trade and the TWI. That this here is only going to show a movement in the TWI. That's not going to show us a movement in the terms of trade because it's not looking at export or import prices. So D, I think, is our best bet because we know that exports have increased because we've got a higher TWI, greater price for exports relative to global demands for the goods that this economy imports. Hence the change in the terms of trade. Or the TOT, if you really want to annoy me. So 16D, Nessa agrees with this here. This is a bit tricky. Feel free to go back over this or even ask me some questions in the comments. Question 17 makes me nervous. If I make a mess of this, please, 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 please be gentle with me. Okay, so question 17 says for a particular country, the underlying inflation rate. Okay, so the underlying inflation rate. The underlying inflation rate, which excludes volatile factors such as food, energy prices, is greater than the headline inflation rate, which includes all prices. Boy, look at these terrible L's, man. To take that L. Okay, so what we can say here is that if core exceeds headline, well then volatile factors must be pretty low. If volatile factors were really high, then headline would exceed core. So let's write this down, right? Let's say that there is a massive increase in oil prices, right? What that would mean is that headline is greater than core, because remember, we would exclude oil prices from core. Excludes oil prices in this example. So instead what we're saying is that actually, if core is greater than headline, then those volatile components are pretty weak. So what we need to do is we need to have a look over here and think about where are the weak volatile factors. So if there is a reduction in electricity production, that's going to increase energy prices. And that's going to mean that headline jumps up. No. if there is an expansion in global oil production, increase in supply, decrease in price, ooh, that's looking like a possibility. Because if global oil prices go down, less prices, less of a volatile movement, headline inflation will fall. Depreciation of the currency, that's going to make energy more expensive, so that's not going to work. Increase in the country's minimum wage, a little bit of a red herring. So our answer is B. If global oil production expands, then volatile factors will be smaller, which will then result in headline inflation being lower than core. That's also a very difficult question, okay? See if you can make sense of it. Questions in the comments. Okay, welcome to question 18. Question 18 has multiple parts and we're going to use green. Now, I've got my cheat sheet for this question right here because it's a bit tricky. So the table shows, come back. There we go. The table shows economic information for a hypothetical economy experiencing cyclical unemployment. Now, this little bit of information is so important. So what we're saying is that if there is cyclical unemployment, well, then the economy is not at the NSW. And you can watch a video on the NSW, little link up above. Very complicated topic. My video tries to simplify it. But the economy is not at the NSW right now. So now I've got things here. So the NSW is at 5% unemployment. We're not there, right? The economy is not there. MPC is 0.8. Change in Y required to reach full employment is $5 billion. Full employment, right, being the NSW. Because remember, at full employment, cyclical unemployment equals 0. So I'm seeing some elements of multiplier calculations here. And then this last bit of the question, check this out. Let's put this in a highlighter. The government of this hypothetical economy increases its expenditure by $1 billion. 1 billion. That sounds like components of aggregate demand. So what I might do is, before I get into these these options, I might try and work this out. So if I say, okay, the NSW is 5%. Question gives us that. MPC is 0.8. Now, if MPC is 0.8 and I'm seeing Y and stuff, I might try and work out the multiplier. I know that the multiplier is 1 over 1 minus MPC, which is 1 over 0.2, 1 minus 0.8, which equals 5. Interesting. So now I know that the change in Y equals K times my change in AD. And I can see that the change in AD here is going to be government spending. So if I have the change in Y, don't know that, but I do know the multiplier, K is here, and then the change in AD is right here, times change in government spending, which equals 5, times 1 billion, which equals $5 billion. Interesting. Guess what? This here says, let's bring out the highlighter, change in national income required to reach full employment is 5 billion. And I can see here that we're going to hit that. So what we can say then is, I've got a pretty good idea about what I'm looking for in this question. So will national income rise by 1 billion? No, it will rise by 5 billion. The rate of unemployment will equal the NSW. Yes, if I get to 5 billion, I reach full employment, so I'm going to reach the NSW. Will the NSW exceed the rate of unemployment? No, they will be, unemployment? No, they'll be equal. The economy will experience a rapid increase in inflation. No, because we are non-accelerating this point. So our answer is B. So many different components, different ideas, all for just 1 mark. So if you can follow along, you're doing very well. Okay, We're going to the last 2 questions now, including question 20, which will drive us all crazy. Here we go for 19 though. So 19 says the following. Let's go to red. Why not? Let's do red. We haven't used a lot of red. So it says country A and country B have flexible exchange rates and are considering forming a monetary union. Country A is experiencing a recession. So again, I might annotate here. They're feeling the boom. So the question says, which of the following is most likely to be true immediately after country A and country B form the monetary union? So if I'm talking about this monetary union, what I'm talking about is that these countries then create a common currency. They both use the same currency. So the idea, I think, of this question is that what will happen is that this will equalize economic conditions in both economies, that they have the same currency. So if you're booming, that's going to come down a little. If you are in a recession, that's going to come up a little, because now these 2 economies are linked by this common currency. So if I look here, what I might think about is this. Country A, who's in a recession, their dollar might increase because now they're linked to country B, which is in a boom. Likewise, country B's currency might depreciate because they're linked with country A, who is in recession. So if I look here, A, imported inflation will be lower in country B. Imported inflation will be higher because their currency is weaker. B, it will be cheaper for tourists to visit country A. No, the logic of the question, thinking actually country A's currency will go up, so it'll be more expensive. C, it will be cheaper for foreign firms to acquire assets in country B. Yes, I can feel that because country B has a depreciation of the currency, so it's cheaper to buy things. The international competitiveness of countries A's exporters will increase. No, it will decrease because their country is experiencing a higher value for its currency. Now, you may question the assumptions of this question. You may not see it as being a given that that will happen, but all I'm saying is that based on the answers that Nessa has given us, I think that these are the assumptions that we need to make in terms of this question. Okay, here we go. Question 20. The diagram shows domestic demand and supply curves. Come on, draw for me. Supply curves for a hypothetical economy. Fine. So what we can see here is a couple of things. So we can see that PW is 6, no problems. 10 is equilibrium. And then 8 would be some kind of protection measure in between 8 and 10. So let's look at the terms of this question. As a result of a change in trade policy in this economy, government revenue increases by $400. Okay, so let's think about that. Okay, so as a result of the change, government revenue will increase by $400. The revenue, where am I? The revenue of local producers declines by $1,400, and the revenue of foreign producers increases by $1,600. I can't emphasize enough to you as to how helpful I find this process. Because can you see here, what I can say is that actually what seems to have happened here is that protection has reduced because local producers make less money, foreign producers make more money, but the government is still making revenue. So some protection must still be in place. So what I need to do is I need to try and find these values. So let's put some points in. So if I think about, let's think about the government revenue first. If I think about that, at point A, government revenue equals nothing, right? At B to C, can you see here that there is a tariff of $2 or some kind of protection of $2 that takes the world price to 8? And I can see that between B and C, I'm going to sell 200 imports, all of which are going to be subject to this protection measure. So I've got tax going up by 400 between those 2 points. This looks good. Let's have a look at what local producers make at point B. At point B, local producers sell 200 units. So point B, they sell 200 units and they sell it at this $8. So that is 1,600. But at point A, local producers were selling 300 and they were selling it for $10 equals 3,000. So local producers here have lost 1,400. Okay, and then our last bit, foreign producers earn 1,600. So I'm just going to move this over here. So we know that at point A, imports equal 0. So foreign producers make nothing. If I go to point B to C, what I've got then is that foreign producers sell 200 units, right? Foreign producers sell 200 units. Here is where the problem arises in this question, because the price that foreign producers sell it at, I think, would be 6, because government collects $2 for everything they sell. But for foreign producer revenue to increase by 1,600, it's going to have to be they sell 200 imports, but they sell it at $8, which equals 1,600 and is then this part of the question. So I'm not sure what we should take from this, whether from now on we have to take that in mind. But in terms of the question, what we are saying here is that no imports has been replaced with a tariff of $2, right? At point A, a quota of 0. But then when we move to get all of these factors, what we're talking about is moving from the world price 6 to 8, which represents a tariff of $2. $2. Okay, this is a very challenging point to end on, and I know you probably might have questions going back to this to try and work it out again, and I understand that, but I'll just go over this little bit one more time here. Just looking here, right? At point A, there are no imports, so foreign producers make no revenue. Foreign producers make nothing. Then if I go from $10 to $8, which represents a $2 increase, plus $2 on the world price, what I can say is that at $8, 200 imports are sold, because at $8, I'm looking at B to C. So I've got that to that, 200 imports. 200 imports. Now, I think, and this is what I was saying before, I think that foreign producers sell at $6 because they sell at the world price and the government takes $2 off every sale. But what I think this question implies, if foreign producers have to increase their revenue by 1,600, that has to be $8 and not 6. So they've somehow ended up selling for that price and they can then earn 1,600. But I think that if they are selling at $8, they only earn 6, and foreign producer revenue would increase by 1,200 and not 1,600. But the answer here is about 1,600. Okay, pretty tricky, I know. I think that the best bit of advice that I can give you is that please don't spend a huge amount of time on multiple choice questions. If one is just not making sense, you're trying things, you're doing everything your teacher told you, nothing is coming together, just leave it behind, right? This is 1 mark. You take a guess, you've got a 25%. If you can make it 50-50, you got 50%. Please don't spend 10 to 15 minutes on one multiple choice question. The exam doesn't give you enough time. Okay, thank you so much for watching our multiple choice look at the 2018 HSC. Any questions, comments, likes, dislikes, I listen to it all. I look at it all. Put it in the comments and let me know what other questions you would like me to look at to help you further your knowledge of economics.